Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. Today, I'm going to mention some recent Office 365 updates from Microsoft. Even though this is a campus update webinar, it will affect all education tenancies. So something to bear in mind, even though you haven't got campus, this will affect all of you. So what changes am I talking about? The Office 365 A1 Plus licenses, that's going into retirement. And there are going to be changes to your storage entitlements in your academic tenancies. After that, we're going to pass over to Edmund Davis from Insentra, and he's going to discuss the Microsoft FastTrack program with you and how we could help you. Okay, so let's get started. If I can get that moved. Yeah, okay. So most, but not all academic tenancies have the above licenses added to them. Namely, 500,000 Office 365 A1 Plus for faculty license and 1 million Office 365 A1 Plus for student licenses. Back when they were introduced by Microsoft, it was an easy way of assigning a single license instead of the free Office 365 A1 license and the downloadable version of Office 365 Pro Plus if you had a desktop agreement. So it's a single license you can assign to incorporate those two licenses. However, as establishments, most establishments, to be fair, have moved to the Microsoft 365 A3 or A5 licensing model, you are already using a single license to assign. So Microsoft now don't see the benefit of it in your agreement anymore. So from the 1st of August 2024, it will be retired. Okay. So what does that mean for you? The first thing you need to do is check your tenancies to see if you've got those licenses, and then see if they've been assigned to any users. If they've been assigned to users, they will need to be reassigned before the 1st of August 2024. So you have a couple of options in that case. You can assign those users with an A1 Plus license to an Office 365 A1 license for faculty or students. Now, the A1 license will give them everything they have in A1 Plus, apart from the downloadable version of the desktop apps, Word, Excel, etc. But A1 will give them those facilities, but within the browser. So there's the free license you can still assign to those users. However, if your users need Pro Plus, or Microsoft 365 apps, as they're now called, then you will need to assign an A3 or an A5 license. So if you haven't got A3 or A5 licenses, just get in touch with your account manager. They can prorate them into your agreements at any time. Okay, so that's A1 Plus being retired in August next year. So you've got a bit of time to have a look at it, but just be aware this time, well, August next year, some of your users might have had issues with not getting access to stuff if you haven't reassigned the licenses. Okay, the next one, again, this is going to affect all education tenancies. Microsoft have announced that they're changing the storage entitlement for customers on the 1st of August 2024. These will affect everybody's current entitlement for storage. So what's going to happen is next August, August the 1st, you will receive a single pool of storage. And this single pool of storage is used across Exchange email, SharePoint sites, and OneDrive file storage. Okay, so that storage you get is shared across all those 3 services. This entitlement of 100 terabytes also adds storage if you've got paid licenses in there. So if you're on an OVS agreement, your licenses will more than likely be unpaid cloud licenses, so they won't add additional storage. So the additional storage you will get will be 50 gigabytes for every paid A3 license in your tenancy. And you will get 100 gigabytes for each A5 license in your tenancy. Now, Microsoft have said they expect this to be within tolerance for or over 99% of establishments. But, some people will still be affected and not have enough storage. In that case, come August, there'll be the option of adding additional storage in 10 terabyte increments or by buying more A3 or A5 licenses. So how much storage are you going to get next year? Well, it's a very simple calculation. So if you're a customer with 500 A3 licenses, you will get a pool of 100 terabytes and an additional storage of 50 gigabytes times the number of paid licenses, which is an additional 25,000 gigabytes of storage. Okay, then if your customer with A5 licenses, in this example, it's 1,500 users, they get the same 100 terabytes of storage. And then for every A5 license you've got, it will be 100 gigabyte times 1,500, giving you 150,000 gigabytes of extra storage. If some of you find out you don't have enough storage, there is additional storage available in 10 terabyte increments. Okay, so what do you need to do before August next year? So the first thing you need to do is calculate your storage entitlement. So you will have your EQU or your FTE count, and from there it's an easy calculation, and as I've just shown, to work out how much storage you will be entitled to. The next thing to do is to see what your existing storage is. That can be done by going to your Microsoft 365 admin centers or Office 365, depending on the case. And then you go to look at reports, and in there, there's storage, and this will give you a breakdown of what storage is being used. And then you can compare this to your new entitlement. Okay, so you can then see if this is going to really affect you or not. It's also worthwhile for everybody to look at how their tenancies are set up. So useful things to do would be to set quotas on your services, like Exchange and OneDrive, to limit the amount of storage people have. The other thing is to look at retention policies for your data, because this will automatically delete unwanted data once it's gone over a certain age and past its use. The other thing you can do looking is deleting unwanted users. It's quite common for people to keep users in there longer than they need be. Students have left, you keep them in there. So get policies in place to delete unwanted users after you're sure that you don't need the data anymore. On top of those data, those things, you can look at doing things like sensitivity labels, to look at and prepare for your new Copilot functionality that's coming across. As Microsoft have said, for Copilot, getting your data in the proper state will be very important for successful implementations of the AI functionality. Okay, now, as I've already said, Microsoft estimates that 99% of establishments will be well within their new storage limits. But what will happen in August next year? Okay, first of all, new technology is going to be added to your tenancies, and it will warn you when you're at 80% and 90% of your entitled capacity. When you go over 100%, you will be given 30 days to resolve your overusage. At the end of that 30 days, if you haven't done anything, your data will become read-only. So it's something you will need to address. Now, you have a few options to resolve this issue. Firstly, as we've already talked about the preparation, look at removing some of the existing data, either by deleting unwanted data or archiving in Azure or on premises, whatever you want to do, but look at reducing the amount of data you have in your tenancies. Your other options then are to add more storage. So you can add additional A3 or A5 licenses, but more realistically, people will be adding the 10 terabyte storage packs. It'll probably be more practical. Now, having said all that, and that this is going to be introduced on August the 1st of next year, a bit of good news is that even though this technology will kick in August, paid additional storage will only come into force at the end of your current 3-year agreements. Until then, you will be able to request free additional storage from Microsoft support. This means that some of you, depending on when you start your 3-year agreements, will have additional 3 years to sort it all out. Okay, but at the end of your next agreement, it will be payable storage no matter what. Okay, so if any of you need assistance with this or any professional services, just such as preparing your data for Copilot, we can introduce you to Insentra. And on that point, it's my pleasure to pass you over to Edmund from Insentra. Edmund, over to you.
Eifion, thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us here today. I've got a couple of slides to just chuck on the screen, so give me 2 seconds to share them. Very good. Can we all see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Great, fantastic. Yeah, as I said, thank you very much. Insentra and Pugh work closely together to deliver a range of services supporting your licensing and the implementation and maintenance of your environment. And so I'll just take a couple of moments to talk you through where we come from. We're going to have a quick chat about Insentra, talk a little bit about the services, and then, as we said earlier, a discussion about FastTrack. Some of you may well already know what FastTrack is, but we'll take a minute or two to talk about that. And then, just to follow up on what Eifion said, a few seconds chat about Copilot. Then I'd really like to offer the floor to you all and to see if we've got any questions that want to be discussed. So feel free to put the questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll pick them up as we at the appropriate time. So Insentra is a global business. We actually founded in Australia originally, but now with strong establishments in the UK, the US and the whole of EMEA and Asia Pacific. We started off doing a lot of Citrix and EUC work 10, 15 years ago, and increasingly now, of course, support the Microsoft stack and all of the related services. There are three key pillars to the work we do. I don't expect you to read this text, so when we share the slides later, feel free. But the first is about advisory. Most of our engagements with customers are led by advisory engagements, and effectively advisory comes in three parts. The idea being to make sure we create a good and robust plan for any activities that are going to be undertaken in conjunction with your teams and with your organization's requirements, so that you get to a planned outcome rather than diving straight into implementation. So there are three varieties we've defined in the main. Map 1 is a strategic engagement to help you build a roadmap, typically over 12, 24, 36 months, to pick out the strategic objectives of the organization and to help you to define a roadmap and a budget for all of the related work streams that put together to achieve the outcomes you're looking for. Map 2 typically takes it one step further and looking at specific outcomes, typically around digital transformations. And that could be a migration, it could be consolidating schools together, or even divesting a school to bring it out into its own separate environment. And it covers all of the technology change and organizational change and training to produce a blueprint for the migration and give you a really accurate and clearly defined plan. And then map 4 is where we get right down into the nitty-gritty, planning for specific things, including Copilot, as Eifion said, but other sorts of information governance and information protection, and things like BI and data analytics come in under the map 4 engagement. We also spend quite a lot of time in map 4 talking about modern workplace and the modern ways of collaborating, but also end user computing. So people who are thinking about moving from desktop machines to Windows 365 or Azure Virtual Desktop, or going the opposite direction from Citrix to manage desktops and bring your own devices. There's a lot of movement in that space, particularly post-COVID and with modern learning and modern campus being rethought for a more flexible student experience. Supporting the advisory work, we have our professional services offerings. Again, don't necessarily dive into the detail here, but a wide range of professional services offerings, from modern workplace and security through information management platforms, including Azure and the like, as well as integration of applications. So whether those are ERP for commercial manufacturing companies or other information systems you might have. And then to support all of this and build a long-term and robust model of engagement with you, we have our managed services, and they typically augment your own internal capabilities and capacity by bringing best of breed service management and best practice to your organization. And often we find customers who are strapped and stretched with their own internal resources, plenty to do on their everyday list, who benefit from having the ability to outsource and offload some of the day-to-day management of their infrastructure and IT organization to a global third party like us, in conjunction with Pugh. So that takes on to FastTrack. So Microsoft, in their generosity and in collaboration with the partners, fund a number of services that allow you to bring your licensing to empower you to bring your licensing up to speed. Microsoft provide the funding for it, so there's no direct cost to you, and it's available to any customers really with 150 or more paid licenses. The FastTrack service is a hands-off or arm's length type service, which provides advice and guidance around implementing features within your licensing set. So let's say you recently acquired the ability to use device management with Intune. FastTrack would be able to offer you advice on planning that implementation, advice on and validation of the configuration you've done, and support in driving the implementation journey through to your end users. There are also some elements of data migration that FastTrack can help with, but it tends to be that you do all of the preparatory work and agreeing how the batches are going to be done, and they can monitor the data transfer and report back any errors. On this slide, when you receive it, there are a couple of links here to give you a bit more information about FastTrack and the services it provides, and to some extent the limitations. But it's a great service that's available to you for free off the back of your licensing commitment to access Microsoft's FastTrack engineers, and by extension, Insentra's FastTrack engineers, as we are a FastTrack delivery partner for Microsoft, and at no additional cost to yourselves. As I mentioned, as well as the service to speak to the engineers, there's also a number of excellent resources on the FastTrack website, including guidance around adoption and deployment of services, and various other resources you can dip into to help you plan your own implementation and your own deployment with the support of the FastTrack engineers. That's a quick intro to FastTrack. I really welcome your questions, so do pop those in the chat in a second. And I'll just take a couple of minutes to talk about and to build on what Eifion was saying about FastTrack, about Copilot, sorry. It seems to be the case that every single call I have at the moment talks about Copilot in one capacity or another. And while there have been some fairly scary looking numbers floated around about the costs, and certainly the early adopters program is only really being opened up to a very small number of large enterprises at the moment. The kind of core ideas around a Copilot are becoming increasingly well known and thought about when we start to consider the likes of ChatGPT. There's been a whole movement recently of interest in the press and in the general public off the back of things like ChatGPT, and I'm sure in the education sector that's equally the case, with concerns around intellectual property and original content creation. But Microsoft Copilot and the Copilot brand is starting to pop up all over the Microsoft ecosystem. So we see already Microsoft talking about Copilot in Microsoft 365 apps, so in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Teams. And this will mainly be about supporting you with content generation, so-called smart templates, and the idea of seeding a document you might be writing with a few ideas and phrases, prompts, if you like, in order to generate content for using the AI. In Viva, we'll start to see it coming through in Engage, Learning, and Insights, and already it's starting to turn up in the DevOps and coding environment, where you can ask the tools to build scripts or functions that you might want to write and shortcut the need to craft the code. But as with all of these AIs and all these AI models, there's an amount of risk associated with getting the automation to do it, and so we need to be quite careful to think about the content that's being generated by the AI and whether it's valid and how to anticipate that. So as an overview to Copilot, and for those of us who are more technically minded, there's a diagram that Microsoft kindly put together showing how it kind of fits together and the key components. I just want to draw your attention really to the one key part of it, which distinguishes Copilot in particular from other public language models like ChatGPT. And that's this foundation on the Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph is Microsoft 365's way of mapping out all of the permissions and context of the relationship between you as an individual, your identity, and the content you're consuming. And Microsoft's leveraging the graph very significantly in Copilot to ensure that permissions, in particular, to content are honored by Copilot's language models and interpretation of the content that it sees. So while Copilot, like Microsoft Search, for example, in 365, can potentially see all of the content that is in your tenant, the actual surfacing of that content will honor the graph permissions model in order to ensure that people don't get to see content or don't get results returned that comes from content they don't have access to. So, as we all know, the proof of the pudding for these things is in the eating, and time will tell whether how that looks in practice. But as Eifion described earlier, the absolute key here is anticipating this evolution coming and how it's going to and the impact it has on your readiness. So, as we discussed, permissions is a key one, and one of the biggest concerns is that we've all been living to some extent, on the hope that the oversharing that's inevitably part of our IT organizations isn't so easy to find. It's been historically incredibly difficult to make sure that we have a minimum level of access to data, and so making sure. So this is going to be one of the really key kind of prerequisite steps that all organizations are going to need to take seriously, is to really think about where the access, who has access to what, and understanding much more robustly what the implication of that access is. Microsoft 365 already allows you to search for things, but Copilot is going to bring that information to you in a much more proactive way. So we need to be right on top of this question of who has access to what.